All right, hello everyone. Today we are on step 4 of how to play Cardfight Vanguard Overdress. This is Leo again, and in today's step we will learn how to play the game. This is going to be a very uh, general way of playing the game. We're not going to look into skills, we're not going to look into abilities, anything of the sort yet, right? We want you to just understand how to play the game at its simplest form, right? The video on Friday will be going over skills, abilities, archetypes, things like that, things more in detail. But for right now, all we want you to know is how to simply play the game at its base form, right? No complications, nothing like that. We're just trying to show how the game is played. All right, so first of all, we'll take our first turn. For the example, we will say that you are going second. Um, so you will take your first turn. To do this, you will just draw a card from your deck, which will bring you to 6 cards total. You do this at the beginning of every turn. From the draw phase, you will move on to the right phase. This is where you're allowed to pitch a card from your hand to take the card that is next in line from the right deck and put it over your Vanguard. This allows you to call units that are a grade equal to or lower than your current Vanguard's grade, right? This is great because it doesn't force you to play um, too many grade ones or twos because you're afraid that you won't be able to write up. The right deck guarantees it. It is a very, very good thing that Overdress has introduced and has brought a lot of interesting deck building formulas since we're no longer restricted by having to equalize ratios and things like that. So we have now proceeded onto grade one. And then now we enter the main phase. Once we are here, we are able to call units that are grade less than or equal to our Vanguard and to activate abilities, which we will talk about in Friday's video. Um, this main phase, certain decks can do a lot of things in it. Certain decks prefer to do things in the next phase after this. But for our example, we will just say that we've called a Trick Star and a grade 1 to boost it, right? Now that we've called the units, we don't want to lose more cards than that in our hand. We will move on to the battle phase. Now we've entered the battle phase. Here we can declare an attack. The attack pattern for decks does vary depending on decks, but for our example, we will just attack with the Vanguard first. So let's declare an attack. We've declared an attack with our Vanguard. Now that the Vanguard has attacked, it performs a drive check. So we will take the top card of our deck and reveal it. In this case, we've revealed a critical trigger, right? But what is a critical trigger, right? So let's understand what these triggers are, right? So here we have all 5 triggers that are currently available in Cardfight Vanguard Overdress, right? The only one that changes distinctly, its effect, is the over trigger, which we'll get to at the end. But for right now, let's focus on the critical trigger. The critical trigger gives your Vanguard, or any unit that you so choose to, an extra 10k power, and as well gives it the ability to deal an extra damage over its base damage, right? Every unit can base deal 1 point of damage, given that we don't talk about abilities that increase its critical, right? We're just saying a standard normal unit can deal 1 point of damage. The critical trigger allows it to gain an extra point of damage, right? Then we move on to the draw trigger. The draw trigger will also grant a unit of your choice an extra 10k power, but instead of giving you an extra damage point, it allows you to draw another card from the top of your deck. Um, these triggers aren't played as much because their shield value is very low. As you can tell, the critical trigger has a 1500 shield value, while the 15,000 shield value, excuse me, and the draw trigger only has a 5,000 shield value. So although it does give you another card, if that card doesn't have at least 10k worth of shield, it doesn't really balance out. But sometimes it's better to draw a piece you're missing than to just have more shield, right? Then we move on to the front trigger. The front trigger takes that 10k that the other 2 triggers prior to it would do and gives it to the entire front row, right? Certain decks love playing these because they will have a lot of units that they can take advantage of. Sometimes their Vanguard attacks first. Usually decks that have the Vanguard attack first do choose to play fronts because they'll have the unit standing and will be able to attack after that, right? Then we have the heal trigger. The heal trigger also grants your unit 10k power, while also allowing you to recover a point of damage if your damage is equal to or greater than your opponent's, right? You're allowed to take a card from your damage zone and put it into your drop zone, right? And now we move on to the over trigger. For this example, I showed the Dragon Empire over trigger because that is the deck that we're using for the example. The over trigger across all of them will give your unit 100 million power and will draw you a card. It itself removes itself from play when revealed for a drive check or a damage check. You can still draw this card normally, and if that does happen, right, let's say you draw it on your first turn, it is just a big shield that you have in hand. It is a 50k shield in hand, so it still allows you to use it to guard. It can't allow you to guard an over trigger, which is something that I've been an advocate of, which it should be that uh, um, the over trigger should be able to block the over trigger, but as of right now, you're unable to do that. And then each over trigger has a unique effect that is specific to each nation and to each overtrigger, correct? So the Dragon Empire overtrigger allows your Vanguard to restand, meaning that it can attack again and perform another drive check. Certain other overtriggers, as like the generic one that you will get in a trial deck, will allow you to gain 100 million twice. So you'll be able to put it on one unit and then put it on another. Things like the Dark States Overtrigger allow you to give your Vanguard a permanent 10k and +1 critical for the rest of the game, right? These effects can range from being very strong to uh, mediocre in some cases, but 100 million power is very strong, and not a lot of things, and by not a lot I mean nothing, can really hit over it besides another over trigger. So now we understand what these triggers are. Let's move on, and let's say we've finished attacking with our Vanguard. Maybe we've landed some damage, maybe we haven't. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now let's attack with our rear guard. Our rear guard will do the same, will turn sideways. If it has a unit behind it with the boost symbol, which we'll get into on Friday, but for right now we can just talk about it, it gives its power to the unit in front of it. Rear guards don't perform drive checks. They simply attack. You just add the two numbers and declare it as the number you're attacking your opponent with. So in this case, we have a 5k boosted by an 8k, so that's 13, right? And your opponents will also be at grade 1, so they are at 8k, right? So we are attacking them for 13. They can choose to guard or not, right? And we'll talk about guarding in just a minute, but for right now, we're just showing you what a rearguard attack looks like, right? Let's move on. This is the end phase. Not much gets done here. There's not a lot of effects that really trigger here, but there will be cards that we'll talk about in the future that have abilities that can resolve here, things like that. But for right now, all you do in the end phase is you pass your turn. And now that we've attacked, we got a guard. It's our opponent's turn, and they're looking to deal some damage to us, right? So we're going to say that they have the exact same board, right? Literally the exact same board, but they have now moved to grade 2 because they went first, which made them unable to attack, right? So they're going to attack us with their Vanguard. Let's do some math. The opponent's Vanguard is swinging for 10k, and our current Vanguard is 8k. That's a 2k difference, right? If it was just that, we could use something like a 5k from a draw trigger to guard the attack, but we have to keep in mind that the opponent's Vanguard will also commit drive checks. So they have the possibility to go past 10k to 20k, right? And if we use the 5, we would only be at 13k, which means they would still break through and deal damage. So let's use the critical trigger that we drove check last turn to guard the attack. The critical trigger has a 15k shield, which brings our Vanguard to 23k, meaning that even if they get a regular trigger, it will not break through unless that trigger is the over trigger, correct? Right. So let's say that let's move on to what happens if we choose not to guard, right? If we choose not to guard, we will be simply taking 2 points of damage, right? So in this example, the first attack dealt a trick star as a damage, and then we're seeing the second uh, damage check happen, and we got a front trigger, right? When you do a damage check, you will do the exact same motion as a drive check, revealing the top card to your trigger zone, but except in this case, it will not be going to your hand, but to the damage zone. All right. So, in this scenario, we've chosen not to guard. So we took 2 points of damage because they have the exact same board as us. So they performed 2 attacks. This is saying that they didn't receive a critical trigger or anything of the sort, right? And now we talk about how do you win and how do you lose, right? So now we have a general consensus of what's going to happen. This attacking defending thing will go back and forth uh, as we go up in grades, right? We'll go from grade 0 to 3, and in some cases 4, and in a very niche case, grade 10. Uh, and we'll go up, and there will be more complex things as you go up. But at the end of the day, this game is won or lost by having either you or your opponent reach 6 damage, right? If you uh, reach 6 cards in your damage zone, you will officially lose the game. If your opponent reaches 6 cards in their damage zone, they lose the game, right? Um, that is the general gist of the game. First to 6 loses. Um, you will not lose if your 6th card is a heal trigger, because obviously it goes into the trigger zone before it goes into the damage zone. And once it's in the trigger zone, it will check to see if you have less than or equal to damage as your opponent, and because your opponent can't physically be at 6, you will heal the damage before the heal trigger enters your damage zone. So that is that is a thing that can happen. It does happen a lot, and in the case of the over trigger removes itself from play when it is revealed for either a damage or a drive check. So it is not a heal, but since it removes itself, it isn't a damage point either. So that is another case where you have to keep that in mind. But for now, we've gone over pretty much everything we've wanted to, right? You know how the restrictions for deck building, you know the pregame rituals. You've picked your nation, and now you have a general understanding of the game. All right. So in Friday's episode, which will be the final episode in the series, we are going to go into all of the more complexities of this game. Things like the icons on the cards, things like the difference between act abilities, auto abilities, um, how to pay for costs for certain things, going into set orders, normal orders, and blitz orders. But for right now, this video, we just wanted you to get a grasp of what the game is going to look like, right? What you're going to be doing right now. For right now, you're just trying to play the game, right? There's no abilities. You're just trying to understand the game. And I think I did a pretty good job of this. This is a series I've been putting a lot of work into. I actually genuinely enjoy doing things like this. So I hope that this succeeds and people like it. But for right now, that'll be all. This has been Leo. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day.